All right, so once you have your installation of Python completed and um, I'm assuming that most of you used the Anaconda distribution for installing your Python package. If not, that's okay. I did want us to take a little look at some of the ways we could use this. Of course, I've shown you, or I will show you, depending on how I sequence these videos, how to use that Jupyter notebook. And I like this. This is web-based, which I like, and it also creates these documents that are printable and nice to look at, which is a huge advantage. Um, I'm a little double-minded to tell you the truth about which platform to use for teaching this, um, because I also like spyder platform. It's an IDE. Um, I like the interactive nature of it even better than Jupyter. However, getting it to print in a nice, easy to read form is a little more tricky. But let me go ahead and show you the basics of spyder here, just to give you a first look. And then perhaps I'll just give you guys the option. Everybody kind of has their own style, own preference, and you can choose. Of course, there is the IPython, just traditional console. This is a more basic editing window that does give you some helps as well. I think sticking with either the Jupyter Notebook or spyder Notebook for most beginners is probably the way to go, however. So let's launch spyder. I could have called it from the command prompt. I'm using the Anaconda Navigator here, which gives you a GUI option for opening it. All right, so, it's telling me that there's an update available. I might do that later. Um, I'll just click OK for right now. Okay, so when we open this, this is going to look a little bit familiar to what we saw when we were using RStudio. That's part of why I feel like it's useful for um, sticking with a spyder IDE for this course, is there is a lot of similarity in the layout. For example, rather than being in the left bottom portion of your screen, now our console, much like the R console, is right here. And you can see we can directly type commands into this. We can use functions here, and it works just like our console does in RStudio. So that's a nice thing. The other thing too is we have a scripting file. You can open a new scripting file under your installation, and notice it has my name here. I could use this and run some code. Let me just find some code, type some code, and just show you how to get around the basics. Um, I know I have not shown you very many things yet, but I will be showing you soon a function. I just want to jump ahead a little bit and just type this out, and you'll understand some of the um, structure of this in a moment. We're going to define a function here, and it's going to do just a very simple thing. It's going to say, bring in some input, asking the user, what's your name? Then it's going to print back a message. Okay, so first of all, notice as I typed, you can see that there's a lot of nice color coding that helps you. For instance, def is a keyword within Python. Greeting is my function name. that I used. Here I used an assignment statement with a function input and another function print. And then I call it and I use open and close parentheses because we've already talked about arguments in R, so I'll go ahead and mention I don't have any arguments for this function. It's in local here that you use input um, to create the greeting in the end. But here I've got it. I can save this. Let me just save it to my desktop so that I don't have to. I had saved something else that I was going to do instead, but I'm going to resave it over that because I just want to make sure that um, I have a copy of this before I run it. Then it's very simple. You can press F9 for each line of code. I actually sometimes prefer keystroke as I'm going through multiple lines of code. So the keystroke F9 will take you through that, or you can simply go up here and run your file. You could also um, run the entire file through a keystroke command also, which is F5. As you can see, I ran this. I pressed the green Run File button, and it asks, what is your name? I'm going to type my name and then hit enter, and it greets me. Hello, Amy. I should have added an exclamation point to that. I could do that, comma, exclamation point, quotation. So there's a very simple program, maybe a nice first easy introduction. Of course, I'm going to give you way more information about functions, etc., in just a bit, but I think this gives you a sense of how it's similar to or different from. Let's go ahead. I may as well do this. I'm going to copy the code, and just to give you a comparison contrast here, we can go back to our Anaconda Manager here, launch an instance of a Jupyter notebook. Remember, well, I can't remember if I did this or not, but in my original video that I made previous to this, I've always used a command line prompt. You can also use the Anaconda Manager, and I don't really care which way you do it. The Anaconda Manager is really just a GUI access interface access to all of these applications. So I'm going to start a new notebook in Python, and I'm just going to simply paste all of that. Remember, you shift enter here, um, and there you go. So it's up to you. There's drawbacks and positives to each of these two platforms. I don't really know which I'm going to use in class. Like I said, I like some of the integrated features of spyder, especially the debugging. We can maybe talk about that later. Um, Um, and so we'll just kind of see how it goes in class and what you guys like. But it's very good to be aware of both of these platforms, or this IDE and then the Jupyter Notebook environment for Python programming. We'll talk about also how to turn in homework once we get to this part of the course too, because that of course will change slightly as we're not using RStudio. I should mention you can run Python script in RStudio. And I thought about doing it, but it's really not intended to be, if you're developing Python code that you're not integrating with other scripting languages, it's really not intended to be used in that way. The only time I would use RStudio as a Python scripting environment is if I'm running some R code and then I realize I really need to run this function within Python, and I want to call it within my R Markdown notebook. Then you can use this package called Reticulate, and it's a really great package. I've had some trouble with it accessing my current installation of Python from time to time, and I'm always having to redirect the setup file for that. But other than that, it's a really great package. I just feel like you should do something that is intended for Python programming rather than trying to manipulate a tool that's really not intended for that kind of programming. So I'm not going to emphasize that, even though that is something that you can use in the future if you are integrating Python and R code into one project, which is, completely reasonable to do much of the time. So just a little mention, and think about that and just remember that for the future. I'm going to save my notebook here and I'm ready to go. And next time we'll pick back up. We'll see which platform I use, whether I use spyder or Jupyter Notebook. I'm not sure myself.